Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman-Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we welcome paranormal investigator, internal medicine physician, and the haunted MD himself, Dr. Donald Molnar. We're going to chat with Dr. Molnar about how he became an investigator and his experiences in the paranormal and the medical world. Hey, Dr. Molnar, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, I love that. I saw you on Paranormally Blonde is where I originally kind of came across you, and the whole haunted MD. As my audience knows, and we were talking before recording, you know, I worked in medicine for 20 years and 15 as a medic. And so I find it interesting, we kind of bridge that gap between life and death, and we're there with the end of life stuff like we were talking about before the show. And so I wanted to chat with you to get your perspective from a physician, because in my experience of working in medicine, not a lot of physicians are really open to talk about the paranormal. And so it's interesting to find one who's, not only open about talking about their experiences of paranormal, but going out and investigating.
Yeah, it is kind of a rare thing. And I think that's one of the reasons that motivated me to start doing what I do with Haunted MD was, there's not a lot of physicians that are out doing it. And if they are doing it, they're not doing it, they're not really being real public about it. I wanted to get the word out that people, physicians and people in science are interested in this kind of thing, are willing to go out there and try to find some answers.
So how did you get into the paranormal to begin with?
So it goes way back. so I've had experiences happen ever since I was a kid. Strange things happen. I used to think I saw my guardian angel. I always kind of share this story. When I don't know how old I was probably like maybe kindergarten, first grade, kind of that area. And I remember I'd see this child-sized white figure. It looked like a kid size, but it was just all light. You couldn't see any facial features, no clothes. And it wasn't overly bright, but just something you could see. And I would see this kind of peek around the corner and then go back. And then sometimes I would see like a flash of light go across the room and all those kind of things. So I started talking to my mom about it. I'm like, Mom, I'm seeing this. I don't know what this thing is. And my mom's like, oh, it's your guardian angel. Don't worry about it. So I kind of chalked it up to that.
Yeah.
So, but those were like some of the earliest things I remember. And then I always tell folks when it comes to the paranormal, and I think one of the reasons I'm so open about it is we have like a kind of an open forum in my house, kind of all my life. And even now we still talk about ghosts all the time. In fact, jumping ahead a little bit, my sister came to visit me in Virginia. She's 2 years old. I have two sisters. We're each 2 years apart. So my sister came to visit with my niece, who's an adult also. So they were like, hey, can you take us somewhere to go ghost hunting? And the reason why I say that is my whole family, we've always just been into ghosts. There's kind of been this open forum for that kind of thing. So as a kid, my mom was really into like spiritual side of things, angels and heaven. And we would talk about that kind of stuff. And then my dad was the kind of the Bigfoot guy. He was into like Bigfoot, UFOs, and he was into ghost kind of stuff too. And he would have a lot of his own stories. And then sometimes we'd end up comparing notes and all that stuff. So but it was growing up, we just always kind of had this thing. In fact, pretty much all of my life, until I left home, to go to college when I was age 18, we used to think my dad would visit us. My grandpa Molnar. So he had died before I was born, but he grew roses. So we would always get these like disembodied rose smells out of nowhere. And we could never, figure it out. And we just kind of chalked it up as Grandpa Molnar is visiting us again. So that was, and there was one time when I was a little bit older, I was probably like 12, 13. We tried to do a little mini seance. It was like me, my sisters, my mom and dad. And we tried to, we had a candle and they were sitting in the kitchen. And it was like, right, we started smelling the flowers, the roses. We're like, let's see if we can contact if it's Grandpa. And we didn't have anything happen, but that was probably like, I guess my first official ghost investigation as a kid in the 80s, 1980s. So, but pretty much all my life, from childhood till now, just the other day, I thought I heard a disembodied voice, say something. And so, I always had all this stuff happen to me. And then I didn't realize, or I didn't think about that, hey, you could probably go investigate this until I saw Ghost Hunters, the early Ghost Hunter shows.
Yeah.
It was like early 2000s. So I saw those and I'm like, oh my God, you can investigate this. And then I never really, I still didn't really start investigating. Although I thought about, I knew there was teams in the area when I finally when I realized that you could investigate, I was living in the Worcester area, which is real close to Mansfield, which is real close. That's where the jail is there, with everybody goes ghost hunting. And like, I was like, it was literally my backyard almost, and I could have went investigating. But at that time that I lived in Worcester, Ohio, I wasn't investigating yet. But I saw the shows. I saw, I watched all of them, Ghost Ventures, all those different ones, you name it, Most Haunted, Paranormal State. And then I ended up moving to Virginia in 2009 for family reasons. And then the place I was working at, one of the nurses came back and she's like, "Hey, we were just at St. Albans in Radford and had all this stuff happen." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "You guys, there's a team around here that's investigating?" She goes, "Oh yeah, and we're looking for new members." I'm like, "You are?" so then I'm like, so I joined them. So that was actually Twisted Paranormal Society. I joined them in 2012-ish. And that's kind of how I got my, how I, kind of got really into investigating. And then around 2018, I decided I'd like to kind of branch out on my own and start dabbling a little bit more, like kind of go beyond just ghost investigating. And that's when I kind of started researching the parapsychology stuff and, and started my Facebook page and started posting interesting things. And then here I am.
Yeah. My story is similar to yours. When I was 8 or 9, I had my first major experience. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a glowing figure in my door. And
oh, wow.
In my doorway. Yeah, my door was wide open and I jumped up and slammed the door and and turned the light on. But I also grew up in a family that really talked about the paranormal and kind of fostered that interest, and they were all interested in it because they had experiences themselves growing up and lived in
right.
My parents had lived in a haunted house. And so I was adopted by my grandparents, I should say my grandparents. So all my aunts and uncles experienced this older lady spirit in this house. And so, yeah, always growing up with a fascination with the paranormal starting there. And then I was also that weird kid that had like the alien posters on the walls and all that stuff growing up. And yeah. And then I found ghost hunters, and I started out as a teenager investigating before I even knew what a ghost hunter was. And,
oh, wow.
And then I found the shows, and just out of curiosity, me and my friends go to cemeteries and that type of stuff and do what we thought was investigating at the time. And and then I found the ghost hunting shows. And so if you live in a family where, they tell you don't talk about that or just tell you it's your imagination, then I think those people, they don't have the experiences throughout their whole life like me and you have. But the fact that your mother was like, "Oh, that's just your guardian angel," she didn't tell you that you're imagining things or, it's not real. Right. Yeah. And as well as I do, when you start looking at the paranormal, it looks back.
Right. Kind of building on that. I think when you're more open to it, like if you have like kind of upbringing that we had, I think you realize that certain things are more than just coincidence. I think people who don't really have a lot of experiences or haven't thought about it much, they kind of just dismiss things that we feel might be paranormal. They kind of dismiss it as just coincidence, or that was just, something. I think when you really ask people, I think a lot of people have more experiences than they want to say, or they just blow them off.
Right.
It's nothing, where, you and I recognize it as, oh, that seems like that might be something that may be something paranormal or may not be, but I think a lot of people just are kind of in denial, or they'll have experiences and just don't want to acknowledge them, what they are, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. So, how would you say that being a physician has impacted how you investigate?
I think the one thing is that always being like a physician and a science person, I always have like a certain amount of skepticism. And I think too, you have a little more logical thinking. Like when you're kind of thinking through an investigation, you kind of think through the steps. I want to do this, I want to have this kind of setup. And also you kind of think about trying to control, like when you do scientific experiments or whatever, you have a control group and you have your test groups. I think in your mind, when I do my own investigations, at least, you're kind of thinking about how can I account for things that could be normal or versus paranormal. So I think you kind of have that little more of a, that kind of thought process. And, for me too, I got to really kind of convince myself what's going on is really paranormal instead of just, I see some folks that just right away, everything's paranormal. I think for me, I really got to prove it to myself that this was something that shouldn't have happened normally, So being a physician and being a science person, I think maybe you just have kind of thinking more logically, and you're maybe a little more healthy, skeptical. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Yeah, it does. I feel the same way. I always call myself a skeptical believer because I have to.
Yes.
I'm not going to.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, I'm not going to discount anybody else's stories because I don't know, I didn't live it. But also, until I prove it to myself, yeah, I'm kind of skeptical.
Right. And I think probably, from you being a medic and me being a physician, like one of the tools I have from being a physician is just how to interview people and talk to people and kind of sense what they're saying or try to get is this something real? Could it be something else?
Right.
And I think, like that's also, being a doc, you can kind of start thinking like, well, maybe this is medication related, or maybe there's something in the house, some kind of toxin in the house, carbon monoxide. Having that medical knowledge, you kind of also are able to kind of think about, well, wait a minute, this seems like this could be, or maybe, does the person have a psychiatric illness? Like when they're telling you the story or explaining something, is it, do they have schizophrenia or something like that? So I think being a doc allows you to kind of look at it from that standpoint too. But also, what I was going to say is you kind of have an organized way of taking a history from people, when to start, where to go, like all the, how you interview people. And for medicine, when we, are seeing patients and, we've learned that like 80-90% of what you need to know is from what people tell you. So you kind of get really good at listening to what they're telling you and trying to pick that apart and all that. So I think, being a physician, you listen a little bit better, and then having the knowledge of like psychiatric illnesses or medicine side effects and, environmental things that could affect you health wise. I think that kind of helps maybe look at a location a little differently if you didn't have that kind of knowledge. So
yeah, I completely agree. And then, the way that we write medical narratives, and you have to be, detail oriented, like you're saying,
right.
Because sometimes the smallest detail, especially in the medical world, if you're trying to treat somebody like on the ambulance, I'm not necessarily allowed to diagnose, but I have to diagnose somewhat to treat, what's going on with the person. And sometimes the smallest detail changes completely how you treat somebody. And so,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I've seen that come in handy when I've done investigations over the years, to be the difference between, something that somebody's imagining, or I don't want to say imagining, it's not the right word, because I don't think they're making the experiences up. I think they're having experiences, but they're thinking that they're paranormal when sometimes they're not, and so sometimes those small details, make a huge difference for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, one of the things I do with medicine is I always try to ask people, like, is this something new or something old? Because that, for me, that really clues it in, because if somebody says, well, yeah, this is a brand new symptom, because I do a lot of hospital medicine. So if it's brand new, then it kind of ups the ante to kind of figure out what's going on versus like, oh, no, I've had these for like 4 years, nobody can figure it out. So it's still a problem you're having, but you're a little less likely to go crazy about it. Like how much do I got to work on this right now? If you tell me it's acute and you're having big problems, then I got to work on it. If it's something you've had for 10 years, and we're not going to figure that out while you're in the hospital. But I think that can also go into ghost hunting, right? You go to somebody's house, like, is there something new that's going on, or is this something you had all, for a long time? And, so I think it helps kind of sort it out. Somebody's like, yeah, this has been going on for 20 years. And you're like, it kind of helps clue you in a little bit.
Yeah. And also one of the obvious questions that I think anybody would want to ask a physician who's into the paranormal is about near-death experiences and the shared deathbed visions.
Yes, yeah. So, if you're looking for like academic, scientific research, near-death experiences and even deathbed visions and to some degree shared deathbed visions, that's kind of where there's a lot of research, especially in near-death experiences. There's a ton of academic research. Even UVA over here, they have Division of Perceptual Studies. They have all this research and papers, written up, and they do as much as you can do scientific method and, controls and things like that with paranormal, they do that. So what I'm getting at is if you want evidence that there could be an afterlife, I mean, if you look at near-death experiences, deathbed visions, and even children with previous lives, there's a lot of convincing evidence. People's like, well, there's not any academic studies. There's a ton of academic studies of near-death experiences, and that it seems like people are, their soul is leaving and coming back, and they have all these things. So near-death experiences, that's when, somebody's close to death or even dead for a little bit, and they have these profound experiences. There's often certain steps that happen that are characteristic of all NDEs, but a lot of times people won't go through all those steps. The one guy I quote, this guy Jeffrey Long, he's an MD, and he has 12 steps he's listed out, and some people have all those steps, and some people only have one step. Usually with a near-death experience, your first thing is you're out of your body and you're looking down on yourself. So, and the thing that's interesting and really cool about that is people are able to know details that they shouldn't know.
Right.
And they start telling you these things before they've even talked to anybody. So they'll tell you like exactly what the paramedics were doing or exactly what the doctors were doing. And even, there's stories about a patient was having out of body. He saw where the anesthesiologist put the false teeth. It was like in a drawer somewhere where, and they couldn't find it. And the guy's like, well, when I was out of my body, I saw where you put my teeth. You put my teeth in the top drawer there. And they look, and there it is. So these out of body experiences, and and the whole thing with NDEs, there's a certain things to them that you can't explain by just lack of oxygen to the brain or medications or lack of blood flow. Just it doesn't fit. So, but with the near death experiences, you go through without going through all the steps, you have out of body, you see the tunnel of light. You have these amazing positive feelings. You may see loved ones or see spiritual beings. You get a life review. Eventually, you got to decide to go back, or you're made to go back. One or the other. So basically, but it's these profound experiences, and then a lot of folks that have them come back, change. Like they'll look at life differently, or they'll have psychic abilities, or if they already had some psychic abilities, they'll have stronger abilities. So it seems like they really affect people afterwards, and then what people describe, it's hard to explain it all away, just being like the dying brain. And then the interesting thing too about near-death experiences is, when you look across cultures, there's, the similar things are reported as far as, out of the body, seeing religious folks, the tunnel of light. Even when you look across age groups, like kids versus adults, they all kind of seem to have the same steps. The fact that it's across cultures, across belief systems, across age groups makes you think there's more to it.
What kind of experiences in your practice have you ever had with like direct patients, that you've seen?
Yes, I'll tell you a couple of things. So I was getting ready for this. I did this talk this past Saturday, and one of my patients was like, "Where are you going this weekend?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to do a talk about near-death experiences and things like that." He goes, "Oh man, I got to tell you what happened to me." And it's funny because I've been taking care of this guy for a long time, and it just never came up, And this guy, he's a paraplegic, and he had wounds, so we were taking care of his wounds and all that. But he's like, he had crashed his car, is how he ended up paraplegic. He goes, when I crashed my car, I was out of my body, and I was looking down, and I could see everything the paramedics were doing. Like they had to do something to his leg to get him out of the car, and so basically described all these details that he would have known, and then he ended up. The next thing he remembered, he was in the hospital. But so he didn't go through like all the traditional steps. He had the out of body, which is usually the first thing that happens. But he ended up back in his body. So that was kind of cool to hear that from him. I'm like, dude, you've been holding on me. You got these good stories. So that was an interesting story recently from a patient. But one of the things that was interesting to happen with me was, I didn't have my own near-death experience, but we were coding a patient. Patient had been getting dialysis and coded. And we were working on it for about 10, 15 minutes. Like usually the person running the code, you stand at the foot of the bed or whatever. So I was at the, running the code, and at the foot of the bed, the wall was behind me. I'm directing everybody what to do and CPR and all that stuff. And it was like 10 going on 15 minutes into it, and we weren't getting a whole lot back. And then all of a sudden, I felt this rush come from behind me, behind me and kind of around me and through me. It was like this like a static electricity, kind of a wind energy blow through me, around me, towards the patient, from behind me, from the wall into the patient. And then we got a pulse back, and then eventually got him back. And then usually where I work now, we end up sending people to the main hospital then, because we're kind of like a satellite hospital. When somebody codes that bad, where you got to do work on them for 15 minutes,
right,
we usually send them to the ER to get evaluated and be admitted. So the reason why I'm telling you that is I didn't get a chance to really talk to him and find out what he was experiencing. But to me, what it struck me as is when you talk to people who have near-death experience, when they have to go back in their bodies, they rush. They said it's like a rush into their body, like they fly back into their bodies. So all I could think of when I had this feeling was that the guy's soul just rushing past me? Because I've never felt that before. It was crazy. And I looked around. There was no vents. There wasn't really a explanation for it. People weren't walking past me. They were just kind of doing their thing, and I was at the foot of the bed. So there wasn't a reason to have that breeze, So I don't know. So that was interesting to me because it made me think about how the soul rushes back into the body, with your near-death experiences. So that was an interesting thing.
That's pretty interesting, yeah.
And for me, the timing, it was like, this rush, and then bam, we had a pulse.
Right.
And then we got him back. To the point where he was able to talk a little bit to us before we got him out. But that rush of energy was pretty crazy. And then I've had other patients tell me bits and pieces of near-death experiences, kind of along the same lines, out of the body, I saw my mom, I saw this, I saw that. I did have one patient that was interesting. He had one, but he wouldn't tell me what happened. And even his wife would try to get him to tell me, and he wouldn't. He just didn't want to say. So I never pushed the issue. In fact, I never really bring up the paranormal as the patient brings it up first. But yeah, he had something happen, and the reason I kind of mentioned that is, when it comes to near-death experiences, and even deathbed visions, most of them are positive and they're a good thing. But there are some folks that have negative near-death experiences and negative deathbed visions, so they're not all positive, and we don't know for sure why some people have a negative one versus people that have positive ones. So
yeah, I find that all. I mean, because the reason that we're in the paranormal is to kind of prove the afterlife to, if not
right.
anybody but ourselves, and so yeah, the NDEs and stuff, that I find that amazing because, like you were saying, there is scientific studies and evidence,
a lot of it,
back it up, and lots of stories, and the fact that all these people have a similar experience,
right?
No matter what your religious beliefs are or anything, across all these different cultural boundaries and religious boundaries, they're all having similar experiences. And, that's not just a brain firing off as it's dying, like some people like to claim.
Right. Well, and the thing too, with near-death experiences is, there's facts that you can verify. Like when they're out of their body, people can tell you things they should have no idea. Even like there's been stories where people, are having a near-death experience and they're out of their body and they actually float down the hall into the waiting room and they can hear what their loved ones are talking about, or they can hear what the nurses are talking about, or they could at the nursing station, or they could tell you something, about the nursing station that they shouldn't know. There was an interesting near-death experience. This is from the University of Virginia, the DOPS Division of Perceptual Studies. This is one that they shared. There was a man. He was a patient in the hospital. I forget what he had. I don't know if he had heart surgery or something. There was a nurse taking care of him. He wasn't expected to die or have anything, but it turned out that, so the nurse taking care of him, she got off of work. Her parents had got her a new car, and she was going to go drive it and then go meet them somewhere. So she goes off her shift, right, and leaves. He codes for whatever reason and has a near-death experience. In his near-death experience, this is pretty crazy. In his near-death experience, he encounters the nurse who was taking care of him. And she told him, please tell my mom and dad I'm sorry that I crashed the car. So it turns out he comes out of the near-death experience and he survives it, and he starts talking to somebody and finds out that the nurse that was taking care of him had took the new car and was driving crazy and crashed it and died. So this is from the UVA program. So she had died and came to him. His near-death experience. Isn't that crazy?
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting one. So that's one of those things where you're like, it makes you think there's more to it, because how did this guy know the nurse? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way he could have known she died, because nobody knew she died at the time that he had his near-death experience. And
right.
So yeah, it was this crazy thing. So that kind of stuff. And the other thing too, I know we're talking about we didn't talk about reincarnation, but when you read these stories about like reincarnation or previous lives and these children with previous lives, you can verify the details that they're telling you. You go back through records and you can verify that this seems to be somebody who lived previously in this, that's now reborn into this child, because they have these amazing details that nobody should know. So when you have those kind of things going on, it's hard to argue that there's not an afterlife, when you look at those studies and all that.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Raymond Moody for like 2 hours on the phone.
Oh yeah, awesome, man!
What an amazing guy! And he's actually the person. For anybody that doesn't know, he actually coined the term near-death experience back in the 70s, and he's been studying it ever since. And he's collected some amazing stories and has some really amazing knowledge. And he's a psychiatrist, and so he comes at it from a mental health standpoint. But really fascinating guy to talk to. And unfortunately, I couldn't put the episode out because of some technical issues. It was just too far gone for me to put the episode out. But just to have the pleasure of talking to him for 2 hours. I mean, he's in his 70s now, and so
that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, he's a groundbreaker in that. The other, for people that are looking for, books to look up or people they want to look into, Bruce Grayson, Greyson, I think it's Grayson. He's doing the near-death stuff now at UVA, and he has a ton of good books out there and a lot of good research. the one book I use is it's called Evidence of the Afterlife by Jeffrey Long, and it's a really good book about near-death experiences. Actually, that's where I kind of go through those 12 steps. He does a great job. I think he was like a radiation oncologist or something like that, and got interested into it. And now he started this whole near-death researchers foundation. So you can go on the near-death NDERF website, and you can either submit your stories or you can look at other people's stories. So he has this whole database now. And Dr. Greisen, I know he started the IANDS. I think it's International Association of Near-Death Studies or something like that. So there's a lot of people that are interested in near-death experiences. There's a lot of good places you can go check it out and see stuff. So, but yeah, Dr. Moody, Dr. Greisen, Long, there's just a whole bunch of people in the field that are, looking at near-death experiences. And then when it comes to share or deathbed visions, that's a little something different. Deathbed visions are somebody's dying and they'll see somebody right before they die. It can be like days, hours, minutes before they die. They'll see either a spouse or a family friend, somebody that's already deceased. Their spirit will come, we believe, to help the dying person's spirit go on to the afterlife.
Yeah.
So those are pretty interesting, the deathbed visions. And then even more interesting is the shared deathbed vision, which is the dying person seeing the ghost of the loved one, but then the person at the bedside is seeing that same thing, which is pretty incredible. And then it may be multiple people, it may be, if there's multiple people at the bedside while somebody's dying, they may all see the appearance of this loved one. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I had something similar. I always call it the angel of death because I don't know what else to call it. I've told the story
Right.
here on the show, and I've told it when I've guessed on other shows. But I first started out in the medical world as a nurse tech working in a nursing home, and
Okay.
I worked night shift on a Alzheimer's lockdown unit.
Oh wow!
And I was on the unit by myself because the nurse and the other tech were on lunch about 3:00 in the morning. And I came up and turned the corner, and there was a tall, skinny guy in a black suit, younger guy, standing at the end of the hallway. And he was kind of illuminated by the double doors behind him that went outside. And there was a parking lot light shining in. And he just smiled.
Right.
He smiled at me, turned and went in this room. And I walked down there because there shouldn't be anybody in the building at 3:00 in the morning.
Right.
Nobody's there. And so I go home the next morning. I came back the next night for my shift, and one of the ladies in that room had died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a ward room. So there was, 2 beds on each side of the room, and it was all women.
Yeah.
It was all women in there. There was no men. But we also had a patient who would always talk about the man in the corner. And anytime she talked about the man in the corner, somebody on the unit would pass away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I don't know, like I've always called it the angel of death, and it wasn't scary. Yeah. His smile wasn't creepy. None of that. I mean, he just smiled and turned and went in the room and smiled like, oh, you saw me type of a smile.
Yeah.
And yeah, that lady passed away about an hour after I left that morning.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've read other stories too about dying people talking about the man in the corner. So yeah. I wonder, if there's not something like a common ground to that. And besides seeing they may see their loved one or whatever, but sometimes there's also reports of seeing a man in the corner. They don't know, what's going on. So, yeah, so those are interesting. I had an interesting story with the deathbed vision. This was 5 or 6 years ago. We had made a lady comfort care, and she didn't have a whole lot of family come in, so I kept kind of checking on her. And she really hadn't been on a lot of medications, and her oxygen level wasn't real bad yet. But I had walked in to the room, and this was before I was like really into what I'm doing now. I walked in, and she's like looking at the ceiling, and she's got these big bright eyes and this big bright smile. This older lady, and I had to ask her. I'm like, what are you seeing? She's like, don't you see the angel? It's coming for me. And I'm like, what? I was looking up, and I'm like, I didn't see anything, but I knew enough at that point that probably meant she was going to pass away pretty soon. And then the nurse came in, and the nurse was like, she's like, what's going on? I'm like, you see an angel up there? And she looked up there too. We both were like, what?
Yeah.
And then I told the nurse after we walked out of the room, I'm like, I think she's probably going to pass pretty soon. And she ended up dying like a couple hours after that. But yeah, to me, it looked like she was definitely seeing something that I wasn't seeing, but she was definitely seeing something,
Yeah.
It didn't seem like a hallucination or anything either. And so it was pretty neat.
Yeah. It's I was like 18 or 19 when I had that happen in the nursing home, and it's always stuck with me as one of the most incredible paranormal experiences I've ever had.
I bet. What do you think about nursing homes? Because a lot of people that work in nursing homes have a lot of stories like what you're talking about, and also just ghost experiences. There's something about nursing homes. It's amazing. Probably even more than hospitals, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, the one that I worked at, that wing of the building that was the Alzheimer's lockdown unit was built in the 1940s and had always been a nursing home. So it had seen who knows how many deaths over the years. Yeah. And the rest of the building was newer, like built in the 80s. And it really didn't have as much activity. I mean, you would hear doors open and close and, footsteps down the hallway, but it was that older wing of the building for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like nursing homes, anybody I talk to who's working in a nursing home, they always have these like amazing stories, about stuff happening, and probably more than you hear in the hospital sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I think with the nursing home, in my experience, because you have downtime more than you do like a hospital.
Right.
The hospital's not ever really quiet. You always have people out moving.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's any more activity in the nursing home. I think you just notice it more because all the patients go to bed. Most of the lights get turned off, that type of thing, and it's really quiet. And so I think it's just an environment where you can notice more because there's not as much going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it's definitely I've had my share of experiences in the medical world. Not so much on the ambulance. Working on the ambulance as a medic and in the ER as a medic, you're kind of too busy to really pay attention too much,
Right.
And so I have heard of a couple of people that I worked with. They thought their ambulance was haunted, and it was an older box truck ambulance, and they had some really? Weird stuff where the lights would turn themselves on and things like that. But
wow.
I always wonder too, like, why would somebody stick around in an ambulance to haunt it?
I know, it is kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I told the crew when they told me about that, I'm like, I think you're haunted, not the ambulance.
Yeah. Well, it's like the haunted cemetery, right? Why are they going to be haunting a cemetery?
Right. Yeah. I'm like, something's following you.
Hey, what about this? Did you ever hear any stories about any of the medics, seeing somebody's spirit leave their body? Like sometimes you'll hear these stories about spirit leaving the body kind of thing or whatever.
I have felt that myself, and I've been an empath my entire life anyway. But when I've been working on people when I worked in the ER, you just feel it sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. One of my friends who investigates with medics for Paranormal, Lee, he works 911. They were looking for this wreck on the interstate at night, and they passed it on the opposite side of the interstate, and it was dark, and there wasn't really anybody else on the scene for them to see, okay, well, here's, the fire trucks are there and all that stuff. And there was a guy on a bicycle on the interstate who they stopped and said, hey, have you saw a wreck anywhere around here? And the guy didn't say a word, but pointed on the other side of the interstate. And
really?
Yeah, they went up and turned around and came back down, and it was a rolled over car, and you couldn't see it from the road.
No way.
And there was no explanation. Wow. And Lee is like, I don't know if this was paranormal or not, but it was just this random guy at night on the interstate riding a bike.
Oh, wow. That is weird.
Yeah.
Did he disappear suddenly? Or?
Well, they didn't see him after that because they were, working on the guy in the rolled over car. But but he just thought it was weird that this guy just pointed them in the right direction,
That is weird, yeah. Yeah, I had a weird experience. It's funny you bring that up now, like randomly people showing up and like you don't know them, but they help you out.
Yeah.
I went to Akron, or University of Akron in Akron, Ohio for my undergraduate training and all that, and actually ended up doing a lot of my medical residency in Akron and kind of that area, surrounding area. But I was having a hard time getting to medical school. I had a tough year. My sophomore year, I kind of goofed around too much and got a bad grade point. So I was having a hard time getting to medical school. I would get interviews. I'd end up kind of getting on a wait list, and I would never quite get in. And I was starting to get bummed out because like my whole life I wanted to be a doctor, and why did I mess up? And then. So I went for this walk downtown in downtown Akron. Akron is like a moderate-sized city. It's not huge, but it had some big buildings, and it was a busy place downtown. So I was walking, and I was just bummed out as heck. I'm like, I'm never going to make it. I really screwed up. And all of a sudden, this lady comes out of nowhere. Never seen her before. Never seen her again. Just all of a sudden she was like almost like a street person. She just pops up out of nowhere, and she looks me dead in the eyes, and it kind of scared me for a minute. She goes, "Don't worry." She goes, "You're going to be the best doctor ever." And I was like, "What?"
Wow.
I was like, "Okay." And then I started walking. Then I looked back and I didn't see her.
Wow.
So I had reapplied for medical school that year. And that year I actually got in, and because I was about ready to give up on medical school and just go do like either chemical engineering or biomedical research or something like that. So, but it was weird because she just kind of like popped up, said what I needed to hear at the time, and then was gone. And then I got into medical school that year. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. That is pretty crazy. To
Yeah.
just some homeless woman you don't know and doesn't know you or anything about you just pops up.
What's weird too is that it's like, how certain things are just so memorable in your life. Like I could still see her eyes. Like she just looked me dead in the eyes. And it was like this, like, you're going to be the best doctor, and then gone. And
Wow.
I didn't see her disappear. I was just like, it was really strange. I walked away, but when I looked back, I didn't see her. But it was like this. Yeah, it was. Even telling the story, I can still kind of get the feelings of that time. It's weird. Like I said, man, paranormal all my life.
Yeah. You've talked about your office now being haunted or having some sort of portal or something in the bathroom.
I don't know what's going on there. It's definitely interesting. So I'm a hospital-based doctor, and our office area, we don't see patients in there. It's just kind of where we go in there, we put our stuff down, our backpack, and whatever we carry in, and there's computers in there, so we can look up the data on the patients, and there's like a lounging area, there's like a TV and snacks and all that, and there's a couple of sleeping areas for the overnight people, and there's a couple showers. But that office area, ever since I've been there, just tons of stuff all the time. It's just you hear disembodied voices, noises. In fact, last week when I was working, the cleaning lady came up to me and she goes, I was cleaning in here and I heard a man's voice go, hi. And she goes, she thought I came back in the office because I had been down seeing patients. And she goes, I thought you came back in the office. She goes, I came back out and I looked around and there was nobody here. So that just happened like the other, like last week sometime. So, and she was all freaked out because she believes in ghosts, but they scare her. And I was trying to tell her, don't be scared. I said, they're not going to hurt you. And for some reason, they just like to hang out here in the office, and I try to calm her down a little bit and all that stuff. Cause she's had some other experiences where I work too. So, but yeah, that was just recently. But anyways, as far as our office, I don't know. We don't see patients there. It's just our home base. We do have a hospice though. It's right down the hallway from us. And that's ever since that's been there, it's been more active because people kind of come to the inpatient hospice units basically to pass away. So probably every couple of days they die in there.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it's, the lights come on or you'll hear noises. You hear people typing on their keyboard and there's nobody there. We have these motion activated lights in the bathroom and those just come on by themselves. In fact, I think on my Haunted MD page, I have a post of the light coming on by itself. And then we used to have the paper towel dispenser, or you still have them, paper towel dispensers that are motion activated, and those are run by themselves. So it's crazy, man. There's so much stuff. And it seems like things kind of come and go. I don't think it's always the same energy. It seems like it's different things sometimes. And then I had a doctor friend of mine. She told me she actually woke up. She was staying overnight. She stopped doing nights after this, but she woke up and saw like a shadow of a woman standing in the room with her where she was sleeping. So she stopped doing nights. And in fact, she even left. She went to the West Coast or whatever. So yeah, so we, it's funny because almost everybody that works in the office is like, there's something going on in this office. I said, I know, it's haunted.
And here lately, you've had a project going on at the infamous Hinsdale house.
Yes. I got invited to be a part of that. A guy named Brandon Mazzullo, he's a parapsychologist. He's actually a psychologist, and he went and did parapsychology training actually at University of Edinburgh. So he has his parapsychology degree, and he's a psychologist. So he put this project together to study haunted houses. So he asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. There's a couple other guys involved in it too that are kind of science based. One guy's like a sound engineer, electrical engineer kind of guy, builds all his own stuff. And another guy was like a molecular biologist. So he wanted to kind of have us go up there and kind of see if we could understand what is it about Hinsdale House that causes people to have all these experiences. Is there something in the house itself naturally, or is there something paranormal, that kind of thing. So he's doing a big write up on it and all that. So, but yeah. So it was interesting because we took a hardcore, as much as we could, a hardcore scientific approach to investigating. Like we didn't use any of the like REM pods or none of the K2 meters or anything like that. We had EMF meters, but they were like scientific EMF kind of meters, and then went into like a computer, and you basically get all these numbers, and then what we're doing is kind of running the statistics on the numbers to see, if you had an EMF hit, was it statistically significant from the baseline? Like, was it really something that means something, or was it just kind of something that was part of the natural EMF of the house or whatever? So
yeah,
it was kind of cool. It was good. It was interesting to see like a whole different approach to investigating.
Yeah, coming from more scientific and trying to gather data to prove, maybe why this particular house has the reputation it does.
Yeah,
I find places like that interesting, and my fascination is it that haunted, or is it just that popular because all the TV shows and stuff have been there?
Yeah, it's interesting to say. Yeah, it's like, I think there is something to be said. Well, with any location you go to, if you have your expectations like, man, there's going to be some wild stuff happening here, I think you tend to get yourself geared up.
Right.
You may be more prone to maybe misinterpreting things as paranormal, or maybe projecting it out to the environment, yourself. But yeah, I think there is something to be said about if it has like a legend to it and all that.
Don't get me wrong. I've been to some places that, definitely live up to the hype, and I understand why they've been on TV so much and things like that. But yeah, it always makes me a little extra skeptical. Also with the Hinsdale house, I mean, there's some incredible claims from people and experiences that have happened in that house.
Well, and if you're interested in that stuff, or if anybody's listening is interested, Claire Miller, who was actually Dandy, she wrote a book. She kind of documented a lot of their experiences. Well, I think most of their experiences while she was in the house. So that's one of the things too that makes Hinsdale unique, that you can buy the book and you can actually read her documented stories. They were there for like 4 or 5 years and had all this stuff happen. So that was the other thing too. I think the reason why Brandon had picked the Hinsdale house, because he had this book to go with it, and had all these, very few places kind of have a documented book of, each day or every other day what was happening.
Right. And
in addition to that, you had all the new experiences since the Dandy family was there and all that stuff. So I'm not sure where I was going with that. But with Hinsdale, there's the book, so, if you read the book and you kind of, that can either affect you one way or another, going in there and all that stuff. I mean, I thought it was a really interesting place. We had a few things happen, but it wasn't anything like extraordinary, like, oh my God, kind of thing. So
yeah, there's like the one room upstairs where swarms of flies just appear, and supposedly some demonic stuff. Yeah. The Hinsdale house is similar to like the Conjuring house. I've had the pleasure of talking to Andrea Perrin here on the show, and she wrote it's actually 3 volumes about that house, about her growing up in that house and the family living there. And ended up being 1,500 pages that she wrote about all the things that happened in the 10 years they lived in the house. But yeah, right. It's nice to have that documentation from somebody who experienced it day to day, and can, you got a whole family that can back up the claims as well. It wasn't just Andrea Perrin. It wasn't just one member of that family at the Hinsdale house. You got all of them can kind of back up those stories.
Yeah, we were kind of wondering too, and kind of what you were getting at before about the ambulance being haunted is was it the family that was haunted more than the house, kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like, was there like poltergeist activity because there was a lot of stress different times in the house? Was it the stories that Clara shares? Was that coming from the family into the house more than the house itself being haunted? We kind of wondered about that too. Was it related to the family? And even like when you go on investigations, you never know, like, especially if you do public investigations, you don't know what somebody's bringing in with them, or if they tend to have poltergeist activity or something like that.
Right.
So you don't know. So even with the Hinsdale house, different people going in there, like maybe you and I don't have experience, but somebody that has poltergeist activity associated with it will go in there and have a bunch of experiences or whatever, and so it's hard to know like what's tied to the house and what's tied to the people that are there looking at it.
Yeah, and there's a project coming out around you going up there investigating with that team, right? Yeah,
there's actually Brandon's writing a book about it. So yeah, I can't give a whole lot of details, right. But yeah, he's going to write a book about it, and just the whole idea. The book basically is what makes a haunted house haunted. Is kind of the whole background or the whole idea.
Yeah, so I'm sure that people can check that out probably later on this year. It'll be out.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Molnar, I've had a great time talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us today.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, not a problem. It was my pleasure. All right, everybody. You can go check out Dr. Molnar on Facebook and Instagram, and check out Haunted MD as well on YouTube. y'all stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Have a good day. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. A big thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. You can find more of his music on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. And as always, thank you for listening.
To the